want to get that context. What is a job actually like? What does it take to get into a role like that? And that's really what School16 is. We started this company and this program to essentially bridge the gap, bridge the education gap for folks between what you might learn in school about work and about the professional experiences that you want to get, and actually then making people ready for those specific professional experiences. That's what School16 is all about with these events that we host. We also have programs that people can take classes and learn about roles in product marketing, operations, and sales. And so we're really excited to have you here and excited to learn from Jackie.
All right, a quick agenda before we get started. This was our introduction, so we're gonna start asking the questions pretty soon here. We're gonna talk about Jackie and how she developed her career in product management and have a discussion about what it's like to work at a place like Etsy. And of course, we want to hear from you. So if you have questions that come up while we're talking and you don't want to interrupt us, then you can feel free to drop your questions into the chat. Sergey and myself will keep track of those throughout the conversation. We'll try to ask as many of them as possible, and we'll try to weave them into the questions that we have prepared for Jackie. But towards the end of the call, probably in the last 15 minutes or so, we will also open up the floor. And so if you want to unmute yourself and ask Jackie a question, of course, we want to give you the opportunity to do that as well. So let's get started. I will stop sharing my screen so that we can all see what's important here, which is our guest of honor. And I'll get started with the same exact question, Jackie, that I ask everybody, is if you don't mind just walking folks through kind of the highlight reel or the story of your career and how you got to where you are now at Etsy.
Sure. So I started at Yodel as an analyst, and I started as an analyst just because I didn't know what else to start as, and it was literally the first job that was offered to me. And I just understood that having an analytical background would be helpful in anything that I decided to do later. And I was an analyst for 2 to 3 years and then became a manager of analysts and helped other analysts learn new analyst skills like SQL, help them manage their work and help them navigate this like workspace area as in a startup. When I left Yodel, I also didn't know what I wanted to do yet. I just knew that I was ready for another challenge. And I joined a company called XO Group, which has 2 main brands, the Knot for wedding planning and the Bump for pregnant women. And what attracted me to this company was that I felt like it had users like me. So any type of problem that they were tackling, I felt like I would be able to empathize and understand and be excited about the problems that they were trying to solve. Their audience base is mostly young women who are getting married or about to have kids. And I also had a really good connection with the interviewer and the manager that I was hiring into at the time. And I took a role to become a sales operations support role where they needed help understanding how much inventory of advertisements is available for them to sell to their clients. And over time, this role evolved into a product manager role of ad products to help salespeople understand new products that they could sell other than just like a digital banner on a website. And the more and more experience I got as this product role, I understood the really exciting parts of it, and I was also exposed to really great leaders that I respected and just wanted to be more like, and really fell in love with this product role. I today see it as the number one way to describe it is you're a leader. And even though there's a million responsibilities that come with being a product manager, I think the trait and the way that people identify you first is just that you're a leader, that you see problems and you try and tackle those problems. And there's a group of people that you need to help you to tackle that problem. And it's your role to motivate the people around you and guide them towards where you want to go. So I was a product manager at the Bump for I think 2 years. I don't even remember off the top of my head. And then I moved to Etsy, where was a seller on Etsy on the side as in my past life at the XO Group, and Etsy was just like the dream brand for me because I love to craft on the side, and they had this community culture of being able to bring yourself to work, not only as your role, but like all of your hobbies, all of your diverse ways that you would describe yourself. They really pride themselves on like bringing your whole self to work. And I had a friend that was a product marketing manager at Etsy, and she needed a PM on her team, and we just had worked together before. So I was so excited to join her team to work with someone I knew and work for this brand that had a great work-life balance culture, as well as like this inclusive, like bring yourself to work culture. And I've been at Etsy now almost for 5 years. It's crazy for me to say that because I'd always been in this like gunner mindset that like I would move someplace every 2 years, because I had read this article that like moving someplace every 2 years gives you like the most exposure to like the best challenges and the and the biggest network, and it's the best way to like advance your careers if you move every 2 years. So it's weird for me to say that I've been at Etsy for 5 years and I see myself here for a long time.
Wow. So it's safe to say that you might disagree with your old opinion there, or the opinions that were in that article. And I think it's a different story for everybody, but clearly if you find a
Totally.
place where the work-life balance works and you're still excited about it, why leave?
Yeah.
A couple of interesting things that you mentioned there. First of all, the fact that you got that opportunity through your network with somebody that you worked with, that product marketer on the team. That's exactly how a lot of people end up finding their jobs. Obviously harder to do early on in your career, but as you progress, most opportunities do come that way. And the fact that you were a user of the product, the seller, I guess, on Etsy, clearly, I'm sure, helped you stand out when you are talking to other stakeholders. But before we get to Etsy, I do want to take a step back. Because you started off in operations at Yodel, and I'm curious, because clearly that ops role, I would imagine, set you up for a product role, or at least to develop those skills that you would need later as a product manager pretty well. So did you have that insight at all? Why did you decide to take an ops role and not, let's say, a marketing role working for a startup? What was the calculus there?
Totally. So one, I would agree 100% that the skills that I learned as an analyst on the ops team definitely have prepared me to be a stronger PM. And at the time, I had no clue. I had no clue what a product manager did. I just knew that I wanted to learn how businesses work, and I wanted to learn a valuable skill that would apply later. And in this, the role itself was called the marketing ops role, but I think traditionally another company would have called it an analyst role, where you're looking at a lot of data to solve and answer a problem, and then giving this problem and recommendation, a solution to the problem, and as a recommendation to another team, which I didn't realize at the time would be a product team or a client services team or a sales team. But the core skill that I think was super valuable was this concept of how to unpack a problem and break it down into a smaller problem and find the root cause of the problem. So like if you have an observation that we have a subscription business and we don't know why people are leaving the subscription business and canceling their subscription order, that's the type of problem that they would give to this analyst or operations team to understand like what trends or what activity are we seeing that might lead to churn and retention, decrease in retention. And I think being able to think through an ambiguous problem like that and break it down into smaller problems, or even a hypothesis on how to approach that problem, has become really valuable in the product role. But I honestly think problem solving and breaking down problems is important to any role. If you're a marketer, if you were a software engineer, it's one of those transferable skills that and a competency that applies in some degree to almost any role. And so that was part of my calculations for like why take this role. I also really value who I'm interviewing with, and specifically the manager that I'm going to be reporting to, because I had gotten advice, and I still believe this advice today, that a lot of your happiness in your role relies on your support system, and your manager has a lot of influence and a lot of resources to support you. Whether that's like, I have a bad day and I just need someone to cover for me, or whether that's like, I don't know how to solve this problem. Can you help me solve this problem? Can you help me learn the tools to solve this problem? Or like people problems where like, this person really gave me feedback that I'm having trouble understanding, and having trouble accepting. Is this seen from multiple perspectives, or is this just this like one person who had a bad day? So like, I think your manager, if you trust them, they are a huge resource to your happiness and your impact at a company.
I think that's really critical, because as job seekers, or as people that are pursuing different opportunities, it's easy to get caught up in the brand of the company I'm joining, or the responsibilities. Is the role interesting enough, etc. But to your point, there's other contributors, or I guess probably the main contributor to your happiness in that role actually is who you report to, and the culture and the team and the dynamic between the team members. You mentioned the work-life balance, for example. That stuff is very, very critical as well. And if you're in a position where you're, let's say, entertaining multiple offers, you should absolutely be prioritizing that. So I'm glad that you were doing that during the interview process. I'm curious, because it sounds like you had the wherewithal to understand the value of getting that operational experience, of that experience, and knowing where to get the data, how to synthesize it, what to do with it, and the recommendations that you make and the like. Which, let's face it, folks, I mean, you can learn some of that in school, but a lot of that is learned on the job, because every company will treat that stuff very, very differently. And who you go to and where you go to get data, for example, is going to be very different depending on how the company is organized. But as a product manager, there's all these other skills that you have to be good at. Persuasion, for example, right? Being able to both satisfy the needs of like your peers and stakeholders at your level, and then people at the top. So how did you address those skills gaps? Or maybe, I don't know, were you somewhat natural with that? How did you make sure that you would be good at some of these other areas that weren't necessarily directly related to what an ops person would do?
I think over time, I started reflecting on what parts of the job are difficult and what parts have come naturally. And over time, I saw that putting in a lot of effort and putting in a lot of time and weight with the people that I work with was really valuable to me, and I enjoyed that part. So even to this day, the part that I enjoy the most is like my one-on-one conversations with the team, with people who are on the team. And what that helped me realize was that by understanding the people on the team, I understand what motivates them, and then how to communicate to them, and then how to lead the team towards a direction that that will resonate with the audience. And I forget what your exact question was again. When did I learn this? And
Actually, let me follow up and maybe ask it in a little bit of a different way, because obviously you had an opportunity to get into a product role through someone that you knew, but I'm sure you went through an interview process. I'm sure you had to do some convincing to maybe address some of those gaps. And so I'm curious, during that process and getting into that product role, how did you convince people that you were going to be capable in doing that job? And why do you think they ended up hiring you for that job coming from ops?
So one common way that people transfer into product is through having a domain expertise. And the most common question that comes up is like, what is their experience with XYZ product? Or the discipline. How many years have they been a product manager, and what have they been a product manager of? And without having product manager experience, I think the easiest way to transfer into product is to be an expert in the domain. And my specific transition happened because I was an expert in the ad products at the company, at XO Group, before I became a product manager. And by having the domain expertise, then you're already ramped up on all of the insights that your customers have, all of the insights that the business has on like what are the business goals, and it's easier for you to match all of those pieces. And then how do you demonstrate that in an interview is by explaining how would you tackle a problem, and how would you prove your direction is the right way or the wrong way. And in a lot of these product interviews, they give case studies or hypothetical problems, and you actually have to think on your feet and explain how you would tackle a problem. And whether you have actual product experience or not, I think there are ways to practice how you answer these questions. And there are ways to bring your sales or marketing or ops or your other experiences to the table to show that that you can solve a problem.
That's really interesting. I'm curious now, especially since you have the benefit of going through that experience, but also I'm sure hiring folks yourself. Are there ways that you've heard people talk through solving a problem that impressed you?
Let me think through the impressed part. So to me, solving a problem is table stakes. I'm actually never impressed when people help me or like explain how they solve a problem. I get really excited about a candidate when they show that that they have this willingness to learn, and that they are really passionate about something in their life, whether that's they have a pet side tech project, or they're really passionate about yoga and meditation and they can like really talk about it like the back of their hand, or that they have something that motivates them that gives me an indication that they can go deep on any problem. Does that make sense? Because like in the actual interview, there's like there's not enough context on a sample case study problem that you could really dive that deep in a 45-minute conversation. But if you marry how someone explains the case study with like fundamental or like reasonable answers, like I have a hypothesis, I would test this, and if I would look for this type of indication, and all of those, I think you could actually read from a book or read from some kind of school program. The part that you can't teach is the ability for someone to care so much about something that they're willing to go above and beyond and dig deep into any specific topic. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Clears stuff out?
I think you know it when you see it. Sometimes it's a. I think I can see why someone might be frustrated, maybe because that seems a little bit opaque. Like, how do you do that? I guess maybe if I were to qualify that a little bit more, like how do you think you can? Because I think a lot of people will claim that, hey, like, I'm passionate about a bunch of different things and I can talk at length about it, but then that can come off as, that can actually hurt you if it's unfocused in an interview scenario. Can you maybe clarify a little bit what you mean by that, when they can, like, the passion maybe for the particular market you're serving a product, right? But then how do you translate that passion in a way that's relevant to success in a product role and convincing you that they would be successful in that product role?
So the ultimate success measurement is that you're able to create change. So if you could pair that you have a passion in bringing awareness to like how it's hard, let's say environmental issues. Like, let's say you're really passionate about recycling, and the goal that you're trying to achieve is to get more people to recycle. If you can prove that you were able to do that through breaking down this problem, then that tells me that you've understood the problem space and the users that much that you can tackle this problem and create change in whatever way that you were able to. So if you were to break it down like more tactically, it's understanding what your problem is, understanding how to measure a goal, understanding the users and their motives to reach that goal, or the barriers that it's hard for them to reach that goal, and then actually creating change through overcoming those barriers that those users might have.
Yeah, I love that. And now the way that you framed it, you can accomplish that through, like, not just like a business that you started. It could be a club, an organization, something you volunteered for, really anything where you solve the problem by affecting change.
Yes.
And if you can specifically tie it to the market that the company serves or the customers that the company serves, that's like a winner. That sounds super relevant.
So I'm curious, because it sounds like the requirement here is quite broad, right? In terms of the talents and skills required for that role. So maybe you can talk about either people on your team or people that you've hired, who, from a specific example, can you think of that came from a very non-traditional background into product, where they did not hold a product role before that, they come from a different industry, maybe doing something else in that industry, and why did you think they would be successful in the role that you ended up hiring or working with?
So I think the two most common examples are coming from customer service into product, or coming from an analyst background into product. And I can speak to why each of them might be valuable, or an indication that you could do with the product role. So as a customer service representative, you hear all types of customer complaints, and you understand the motives and the pains that every different type of customer is experiencing. And this builds like a deep sense of like user empathy, so that when you're a product manager later, you can better evaluate which insights are going to make an impact versus not, because you have like a deep understanding of the pain points that that customer has. And I think it's a skill and something that people build over time, is having the ability to empathize with others and specifically tease out the right insights from a user, whether that's from a user interview, or whether that's from an email complaint, or from any insight source. But you're another part of being a product manager is that you get insights every day, and you have to sift through which ones are the most important to hold on to and to anchor your strategy. And I think customer service representatives have a really unique seat in being able to hear all types of customer pain points. And another part of their role is to surface which pain points should get escalated to their manager or to their product teams. And that skill is really valuable. And then for the analyst role, we kind of already talked about, it's about breaking down a big ambiguous problem into a smaller problem, and to find trends or insights that you believe could solve this big ambiguous problem with data insights.
Got it. But now let's say I'm a customer service rep at a CPG company, retail, right? Maybe there's no real tech there at all, maybe tech enabled, I guess, if it's e-commerce. What would make my resume stand out to you, since I don't have any product experience, I don't really have any tech experience, but of course I do have a lot of experience in dealing with various customers and giving feedback around product, just a different type of product?
So I recommend that you definitely need some sort of technology background or domain expertise background that matches that company to be a valid candidate. And if you don't, that should not deter you from keeping that role as your goal, but as a stepping stone, what might be more feasible is some kind of role that you're more that is more entry level, and then to transfer into product management after you already have a reputation at that company. It's very difficult to become a product manager at a company with zero expertise or zero domain expertise, like discipline or domain expertise. So if you were a retail customer service representative, then I think you're a great candidate for a retail specific company. And then you just bring in other examples of how you're familiar with the tech space, and that fills that checks all the boxes.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I do remember when I worked in ad tech as well for a while, not in product, it was sales engineering, but because I had developed that domain expertise, I was getting interviews for product management roles pretty easily at the time. But I wanted to get out of ad ops, so and advertising tech. Okay, that's very interesting and great advice. The stepping stone analogy is critical. So, don't get discouraged if you don't have the direct experience, but you have something, you have the domain expertise, and leverage that something. So then I'm curious, because product does mean different things at different companies. And by the way, folks, if you want to drop your questions into the chat, I encourage you to do that now, but also we'll open up the floor to questions in about 10 or 15 minutes. But my next question to you is, you worked in product at the Knot or the XO Group, and then you ended up working at Etsy, and you stuck it out, obviously, for 5 years and beyond now. What would you say are some of the biggest differences in how in the product function across these two different companies? Culturally, I'm sure they were different, and you can touch on that if you'd like, but I'm curious about the actual product role. What was your experience like in one company versus the other?
So the role itself is generally the same, in that you are responsible for an outcome and you're responsible for leading a group to achieve that outcome. So an example is like, you're responsible to launch a website, or you're responsible to get 5,000 new customers. And however you get that, you figure it out with your team, which is and a majority of your team are software engineers, but you also work with marketers, you work with copywriters, you work with user research and other legal, other types of team members. But the majority of your team is a software engineer. And the differences, though, were that I can most greatly talked about is like how we got to our insights because of the size of the company. So at XO Group, the whole entire bump team, for example, was only 40 people. And so we didn't have the types of resources that Etsy does, where the whole entire company at Etsy is almost is over 1,000 people. So we didn't have dedicated analysts at XO Group where we do at Etsy. And because we didn't have dedicated analysts at XO Group, it's up to me, the product manager, to pull the raw data from the tools that we do have, or rely on partners like the engineering team to help me pull certain insights. But at Etsy, I don't pull data at all, ever. And the source of truth comes from a dedicated analyst who does the search, the SQL query, and does the analysis. And it's a report that someone else delivers to me. So I think that's the biggest change in responsibility from both companies. But the overall role is the same in that you're trying to create change and solve a problem through leading a group of software engineers.
Got it. That's helpful. We have actually some really great questions coming into the chat, so we're going to start addressing those right now. I'm going to start with Snezha's question, which, and if Snezha, I'm going to take a little bit of the liberty here to reframe it a little bit. She asked, how do you handle conflicts in the workplace? Feel free to answer that. My way of sort of qualifying it in the realm of product is, do you have a situation or scenario where there were conflicting priorities, which is like, that's what happens in product all the time, where you were able to address that conflict and move forward with a solution?
Yeah, so this happens every day where one person requests something from the marketing team. They really want an email to be sent out before the holidays, but a different team, like the customer service team, they really need you to fix a bug, fix a tool that's broken, because that's giving them pain for their team. And I think what helps deliver bad news to those specific teams is to give them an understanding of why you are not going to work on that XYZ thing. And if you can explain why something else is more urgent or more important at the time, then it gives them more transparency into how you're making that decision, and why, in the grand scheme of things, what they think is the most critical thing is not really the most critical thing. And it also helps set expectations, like it helps to prevent this if you can set up expectations earlier and as upfront as you can, and share your plans ahead of time so that they already know, oh, Jackie's team is busy working on the homepage. They understand that whatever request that they have next, if it doesn't fit in the homepage, then their expectation that you would just drop everything that you're doing is more realistic. Does that make sense? So like, give them a timeline on, if you're not going to fix something, or if you're not going to do something for them now, then when is the next appropriate time it could be done. Give them an example of why you're not going to do it, and then try as best as you can to set expectations ahead of time for what your plans are, so that they have an understanding of where their request fits into your plans and what your goals are.
That's excellent feedback. That's probably why you're hired to be a product manager, not only to manage these moving pieces, but also to be on top of over communicating these things, setting expectations. That's probably the biggest pain point I see in any company I've ever worked at, is, and not just product teams, it's across teams. And of course, product touches multiple teams, is when expectations are not set correctly, or there's just information hiding for some reason. And then that's how problems bubble up. So I think you somewhat addressed Jeffrey Kim's question, which is, share some specific deliverables that you have. You're working on the homepage, for example, that's one. But you as a product manager, you do have a bunch of different things that you're working on at any given time. So I'm curious to adjust that question a little bit. How do you prioritize some of these tasks? And I guess then we can tie that to part two of Jeffrey's question, which is how do you actually measure success? And is this something that you keep track of yourself or share it with the team in terms of the actual metrics around that success?
Yeah, those are all great questions. So I'll start with high level and then we can get into the nitty gritty. So at a high level, an example goal or deliverable the team is responsible for might be to improve conversion rate for buyers who are thinking about buying something but need a nudge to like actually convert and buy the thing. So that is the outcome that we're looking for and the measurement of success. And we have different, and I think first aligning on like how exactly will you measure conversion rate, how exactly will you measure success is really important for the team, and to set up front before any work gets done, before anything is prioritized, and explaining the why behind why that outcome is important. And then after everyone's on the same page with what the goals are and how you measure that, then there's a series of what we call like discovery workshops and exercises to share context with your entire team on what are the driving insights that will lead you to your solutions. And what we found is that that exercise is really valuable for everyone on the team, all engineers, so that everyone has a context once they get into the solution. Because I can't be in every place every single day, and as much context that you can give your team the tools to help solve problems when you're not there. And so that's the high level. And then at like on a day-to-day basis, what this looks like is there might be presentations, PowerPoint decks, there might be Google spreadsheets, there might be Google Docs that explain what the goals are, what are the driving insights, and then what are some ideas that could solve these problems and could solve getting to those outcomes. And like y'all said, like communication is like 90% of my job, and the formats are Google Doc, email, PowerPoint decks. And depending on what company you're at, they might rely heavily on one format or the other. Slack is another channel that we use a lot for updating our stakeholders and updating the team. And like a nitty-gritty day-to-day example might be to write up a summary of these are the 4 bullet points of insights that we're going to focus on, and these are the 2 decisions that we made, and these are the 2 timelines that everyone needs to be aware of these of this body of work.
Next, I want to address Jason and Andre's question, which is somewhat similar. There's overlaps, and in terms of the technical skills that one should think about prioritizing. We mentioned SQL several times. Really, anything that can help you learn how to collect data from a database, I'm sure would be helpful. What other technical skills should people think about acquiring? Because you just talked a lot about, Google Sheets, Google Docs, communication, maybe softer. Well, Excel is not a soft skill, but some of this other stuff is softer skills. But what about the hard skills? Because you mentioned, for example, changing the homepage, right? I'm imagining that requires at least some knowledge of front end development and design. So should people be spending their time getting technical? And if they're gonna pick like a programming language or other technical things to learn, what should they prioritize?
So I would not spend bukus of time learning a programming language, and I would rely on your engineering partners to help you understand what's needed to solve those problems. I think you need to have a baseline understanding of how development works and how front end versus back end works. But I wouldn't say that you need to actually learn CSS or Java or anything like that as a PM. And that, like, if I were to just pick one technical skill, it's to be able to use Google Sheets or Excel. And that SQL and programming language are nice to have. They are, I mean, they're the type of thing that if you're trying to stand out among 100 candidates, then the more you know, the better. But when I think about like the best product managers that I know, they're not the best because of that one skill.
Yeah, and I can echo that because I mean, as some of the people on this call know, I was a nerd in high school. I took AP Java and C++ and the like, forgot most of that through college. And then everything that I learned that was technical on the job, like one of the startups I had to work at, I would have to edit Perl code. Don't ask me now to do that. I would have no idea how. But at the time, I just looked at documentation. I asked the engineer for help, and then I figured it out. So a lot of the stuff, SQL, same thing. You're probably gonna have to ask for some help, then try to learn as much of it yourself that you don't have to go to that same person for help every time you need to collect a piece of data, for example. A lot of that can be learned on the job.
So we have an interesting question from Jessie Ying, and she asked, from your experience at Etsy, what type of marketing data do you rely on or do you value the most to help you with your job? And I'm actually even curious because it is a two-sided marketplace. You have the buyers and you have the small businesses that list their products. Is that marketing data sufficiently different, let's say, for somebody on your product team versus another product team in the company?
Sure, and I'm curious from y'all's perspective, when I say marketing data versus like just general data, is that interchangeable for y'all, or what do you mean by marketing specific data?
And Jesse, you can unmute yourself and chime in.
Hi, Jesse.
Hi, Jackie. So I think for marketing data, currently I'm working at a fintech startup as the marketing intern, and half of my job is very analytical based. So my goal is also to improve conversion rates, impressions, etc. So kind of those kind of data when it comes to managing your product, what are the data that you value the most or you want to improve?
Got it. Okay. So I think that the different types of data that you want to look at is dependent on what stage of the funnel your user is in. So like at the very large end, if you're just trying to like bring new users to your product, then you care about the channels in which you're bringing new users to your product. And then after you've gotten people to the product, then you want to look at like their engagement with the product to get them to use it and fall in love with their product. And then after you have your users use the product, then you want them to come back. And I think different marketing teams and different product teams care about different stages. And specifically for the top of the funnel, like for the widest lens, people tend to look at like where traffic is coming from. So like, did you find me from Google? Did you find me from a referral link from your friend? And that's a common place for marketers to understand how to get more traffic. In terms of engagement, I think the product manager will want to ask them, well, what is the first thing that you want your user to engage once they reach the product? Is it that you want them to sign up? And then for an account, if you want them to sign up, then the data point that you want to anchor your success on is around sign up rate. and the conversion to signing up. And then there's like becoming a repeat customer and coming back. That's always a valuable data point to keep in mind too.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Awesome. Thank you, Jackie. And thank you, Jesse, for asking that question. I see a question here from Maria, but Maria, maybe if you'd like to unmute yourself, because I think you might need to clarify or qualify that question a little bit more. Do you want to ask that question right now?
Sure. Hello, everyone. So my question is, well, currently we're in the pandemic and, e-commerce is growing. So my question is, as a manager, where do you see you need the most help with? Are there any responsibilities or any aspects of your role that are you currently experiencing heavy lifting with and you really need some help?
That's a good question. I talk to my manager about this all the time, and part of the product role is challenging compared to other disciplines because many times you're the sole person who has enough context to actually make a decision. And it's really hard to delegate sometimes to other people because they don't have enough context. But we try as much as possible to delegate, like communicating updates to another team, or delegate updating this deck to be most up to date, or of all of the 100 insights that the customer service team has sent us, what are the top 3 and why? So there are small things that other people can help with, but the product management discipline is challenging because they're small things. They're not like the large parts of your role is like creating a strategy for the team, and only you can really create the strategy. Other people can give you feedback on the strategy and make the strategy better, but only you could really like start and propose a strategy that makes sense because you're the person who has the most context. But if I were to think about like what maybe is the most, even the product role at Etsy versus at XO Group, something that's already easier at Etsy versus XO Group is understanding the data. So like if you can find someone to analyze the data for you and give you a recommendation, and look at every single slice of the customer, like new users versus old users, female versus male users, people who have bought something before versus not, then I think that would be the most like concrete thing that someone could take off of your plate without you having to give them all of the insights. Does that help, Maria?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. That
Cool.
clears it. Thank you.
And specifically, like what during the pandemic, what is something that I'm challenged with today is how do you create ambitious goals without making your team feel like they need to perform at non-pandemic levels. And like something that the leadership team is really worried about, and I'm worried about, is our team burning out, that a lot of people have other responsibilities outside of their work, whether that's like being a caregiver for their parent, being worrying about financial things, whatever that is, that these are like very different times than non-pandemic times. I'm sure everyone has their own unique experience, and we're trying to be sensitive to understanding people's capabilities and what they're able to bring to to the team without without making people feel like they aren't contributing, or without making people feel like they're not doing enough. And how we're trying to tackle this problem is to reduce focus as much as possible. So everyone always has like a to-do list of like 30 things that they want to do in the week. But part of my role is to help reduce focus and prioritize so that people don't feel like they need to do 30 things and they just need to do 5 things, the most impactful 5 things. And so I think that's the most challenging thing.
Great point. Obviously, the dynamic is very different now. So we have time, since we only have a few more minutes left, we have time for one more question. And I saw Yashar's come in here second to last. So we'll grab that one. Have any products you've launched failed? I'm sure the answer is yes, just because there's usually more failure in life than successes. And how do you rebound from that? Or maybe at the very least, you know, how to make sure that it doesn't look like a failure, you can actually learn from it and move on and succeed.
So you kind of stole my answer at the end there with there's nothing that's really a failure, and that you, as the role of the product manager, it's your job to turn everything into a learning. And so how you could set expectations though, so that other people don't feel like it's a failure, is you could set expectations that you're trying to learn X, Y, or Z, whether you achieve that or whether you achieve like a certain metric or certain KPI, get sellers to sign up more or get buyers to convert more, whether you achieve that number or not, in the process, you're learning what not to do or what behavior changes are happening and the dynamics between everything. So I don't think I've ever used the word failure or anything like that in my workplace in my entire career. And that instead you want to transform everything into a learning.
Yeah, that's a really good answer to close on, I think. And folks that dropped the questions there at the very end, appreciate them. Sorry that we didn't have time to get to them. But really, really insightful information, Jackie, and I appreciate you spending the hour with us. We'd definitely love to have you back. Folks, you know, we do have these events sometimes a couple times a month, sometimes monthly. Oftentimes we'll have a panel as well. So I'm extending that invitation now for a future panel that we might have, Jackie, because you had really, really incredible insight, I think, not only given your experience, but clearly it shows that you care not only about your role, but you know, the people that you work with, and you think about this stuff a lot. And I certainly learned a lot. So I really appreciate the insight that you provided for the group.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Jackie. And folks, just by the way, thanks for the great question. Really appreciate folks chiming into the chat. You guys had really insightful questions. We have a smart group here. So thank you for joining us today. And I also just dropped the survey link. Hugely appreciate it. It should take about 1 minute for you to fill out, but we'd love to hear what you liked about this event. If you come to these events consistently, you know that we always take everyone's feedback and we try to incorporate it. So we really do read every single response and we appreciate it. So thank you all for joining. And thanks again, Jackie, for spending the hour with us and being so open about your experiences.
Of course. Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Have a great night.
Bye, everyone.
Have a good one. Thanks, everybody.